Welcome into ATL Day Ones with Jarvis and Tenitra. Coming up on today's show, should the Atlanta Falcons bring Kaleb McGary back?
And we always knew what was going to happen with the Hawks, but the timing of when?
And last but not least, and for the culture, why they out here hating on Snoop? That's all coming up next, right here on ATL Day Ones. Let's go.
This is ATL Day Ones, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta. And it starts now.
I want to say thank you for making ATL Day Ones your first listen of the day. Remember, we are free and available wherever you download your podcast. And wherever you download your podcast, make sure that you leave us a 5-star review. Really appreciate that from you in advance. Today's episode of ATL Day Ones is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to get more information so you can get started on making some money. But T, the thing about today is, obviously we're going to talk about the Atlanta Falcons with Kaleb McGary. We're going to get into Nate McMillan a little bit later on as far as him being fired. But we have to start off with Terry Fontenot and Arthur Smith going into this offseason and the decisions that they have to make. And I think when you think about the opportunity for them to franchise tag Kaleb McGary, it's $18 million. That's pretty doggone rich for a guy like Kaleb McGary. I know he's made the right transition into becoming the guy who's known to be a good run blocker. That was the story out on him when he came out of college, and he's kind of proved that this past season. But you know how I feel about guys who get right in those contract years, T. But what are the Falcons going to do?
Not franchise him for starters. Not if they're smart. Not if they're smart.
Yeah.
One thing we can say about an O lineman is you really can probably find, I don't want to say a top tier per se, because we did notice that the trend in the last few weeks of the regular season were for many teams that had those great O-lines, the Ravens, even the Chiefs, if you will, the Eagles. They started shoring up their guys, right? So maybe not your top tier right tackle is out there and available. However, maybe that next tier, which still would be a tier up from a Kaleb McGary, that guy may be available.
Right.
Other thing is this: the Falcons have 9 draft picks, right? And I know you don't necessarily want to kind of start from scratch, if you will, but if there's a guy out there in the draft who has an upside, who has way more upside starting this year than Kaleb McGary had even in his second or third year, because obviously, like you said, we saw the fourth year, I would rather them just go after that person. I don't think you franchise tag Kaleb McGary. I don't think there's enough there to warrant it. And to your point, when that franchise tag would mean $18 million, is he really worth that based on what the rest of the market is bearing? I don't know that he is.
And that's why, and I think you've made the best point right there, the market bearing. I think that Terry Fontenot is going to bank on that the market for him, or see, excuse me, him going out and testing the market. I can't even get it out. I'm so anxious. I think he's going to bank on going out there, seeing what teams are talking about, seeing what those are. I think they're going to have a good number in mind. And Bill Barnwell even dropped in his ESPN article about maybe about $12 million a year, almost $50 million total over 4 years, which is not that bad. That's not not that bad of a contract when you're talking about
Not
a guy like Kaleb McGary. Yeah, he'll be in the top 10 paid as far as right tackles go in the NFL. And for Kaleb McGary, you should appreciate that.
Oh God, yeah, yeah. Because when you look at the market value, and this is of course just an average, if you will, at right tackle, you're talking about anywhere from like on that low end around like the 3.3 mil mark, and then on kind of that high end. And again, this is just kind of that average, if you will. Right. 6 mil might be there, but most like your top tiers, they hover around like 10, 12. So yeah, if he came in there, I think he'd be fine. Or if they couldn't work it out, or they felt like they could get somebody better in the market for that amount of money, they actually can. Because there are several who, to our point, and we do know, of course, there are going to be teams that don't want to let their guy go. And if they didn't shore that guy up at the end of the regular season, but you sure have a lot of unrestricted free agents out there, and not just unrestricted free agents, Jarvis, but when you start looking at the ages, if you will, you got some guys out there who have enough veteran experience, like 3 to 5 years, but they're not so old that you're like, dang, we may only get 1 or 2 good years out of that guy, and then we've got to go back to square one. So I feel like the Falcons are still in an advantageous position at right tackle to do whatever they think is appropriate for Kaleb McGary.
And I think that when you talk about the jump that he did make, I don't think McGary made a big enough jump where the Falcons are pressed to sign him, or they feel like they have to sign him. I wholeheartedly believe that the Falcons have options, and when in doubt, you can always go to the draft, because there's several good tackles that you can get at 8, and there's some guys that you can get in the mid rounds as well as finding good value in. And I think that Terry Fontenot is going to be more than likely he's going to make the best decision, and I feel like it probably won't involve dropping that franchise tag on, because $18 million is just too much money. Now, when you think about, what the Atlanta Braves, let's talk about the Braves a little bit here, because spring training going on is in full effect. That they had the first full squad practice today, and T, some of the things that the Braves coming in here, nobody was really concerned about the pitching style or the pitching rotation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they just have plenty of options. We already know the first 4 are locked in. Mike Soroka, you talking about Max Fried and Spencer Strider, and now
Charlie
and Kyle
Morton.
Wright, and Morton and Charlie Morton as well. So when you have all those guys into play, but the latest news, we have Michael Soroka, not Mike. Michael Soroka had a little tight hamstring, so he's going to be delayed a little bit. And then we've also found out that Kyle Wright had a cortisone shot in his shoulder to kind of get rid of some soreness, and he kind of took a break coming into spring training, so he's going to be pushed back a few days as well.
Right.
But my question to you is, though, T, do you feel like the Braves' overall plan for their pitching rotation is going to have to change a little bit? Or are they going to have to move some things around a little bit as the season gets started?
Yeah, and that's, I think, a critical point that you just made as the season gets started, because what I'd like to see is how each of them fares in Grapefruit League play. Once we get to see them there, or like Max Fried, for example, he's doing live batting practices right now. We're literally getting play-by-play from our guy, Grant McCauley, our Locked On Sports Braves insider, who's down at Northport for spring training. That's what I want to see. I actually want to see where Max Fried is. No injury involved, right? But just kind of see where he is. To your point, kind of see if we can see something from Kyle Wright, kind of like you said, see if that hamstring is going to be an issue, or if that's just a tweak, like a true tweak that with some rest, he'll be ready to rock and roll when it's time for him to start in that second game when the regular season starts. And then I think thirdly, it kind of depends on the same for Charlie Morton. Where is he? Because, he's pretty much the oldest guy on the roster. So where's Charlie Morton as far, and Spencer Strider, of course, he was pretty much rested for much of the end of the regular season last year. So you want to kind of see where Spencer Strider is, which you'll see today. He's actually approaching the mound as we speak. So that said, Jarvis, I think a lot of it will be dictated by, and I'm going to go past just the 5-man rotation, but how does everyone look relative to injury? Does anyone else tweak something between now and the regular season? And then, Jarvis, to your point, it might dictate, oh, wow, does Alex Anthopoulos have to start looking even harder at who might be in the farm system and available? Should they have to do a call-up of sorts? Or, to your point, is Michael Soroka not quite back where he needs to be, such that he's in that 5th position? But maybe Bryce Elder, Ian Anderson aren't quite ready. Kyle Wright is a little bit tweaked with his injury, more so than they thought. Charlie's not ready, etc. Said all that to say, then I would expect him to maybe go out and look for that veteran that we know Alex Anthopoulos is sneaky good at finding some guy that nobody else seems to realize, that guy still can play, right? That's what I kind of see. But I think we've got to get through a little bit of Grapefruit League play to see where we are.
And I think the 2 names that you just mentioned that are vital to this conversation, Ian Anderson and Bryce Elder.
Indeed.
I think those are that's the beauty of being able to say, hey, we can go with a 6-man rotation if we want to. But I think those, but with the season started, season getting started and these guys potentially being delayed as far as
Mm-hmm.
their development in the Grapefruit League to make sure they are okay and everything is fine before they start, thinking about setting that rotation at the beginning of the season. I think those two guys, Bryce Elder and Ian Anderson, are guys going to be come into play, and I think that the Braves already have a plan for a backup plan. And I think if
Yes.
they need to go, like you said, outside of the organization,
Mm-hmm.
I think they'll be just fine as well because we already know Alex Anthopoulos has an eye for talent that
Yeah.
has not necessarily performed as of late, but
Right.
it still got some juice left to give them exactly what they need.
Mm-hmm.
Now, T, we know Nate McMillan got fired, and we knew this was coming. We knew this was coming. We knew it more than likely he was going to step away, how they wanted to use the verbiage they wanted to use at the end of the season. But we did not see this coming as they're getting ready to start practice for the second half of the season. We're going to
Mm-hmm.
talk about all that next. We're breaking all that down. But first, got to talk about FanDuel because it is the best sports book in America. If you guys rock with the best sports ATL, national, worldly podcast and ATL day ones. Why don't you get with the best sports book in America? FanDuel.com/locked on. That's the website that you need to go to. And guess why you need to go there? It's because they have the no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bucks back. If your first bet doesn't win. So if you lose your pants, you up here betting that the Atlanta Hawks are going to win the next 10 games. Yeah, no, that probably ain't gonna work. You don't need to do that. But if you do, they got you. They got you. I promise they got you on the $1,000 bonus bets back. Now, here's we go. So don't miss the chance to get no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to fanduel.com/locked on. That's fanduel.com/locked on to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports bet book of the NBA.
Jarvis, you'd said two things in our last discussion about the Braves that could actually segue right into our discussion about the Hawks. One thing you said was we talked about I'm going to put it in a basket and say embarrassment of riches when you can actually have a conversation about a legitimate conversation about six-man rotation. That means you have an embarrassment of riches, Braves. Mm-hmm. And the fact that we're confident that even if they have to go outside of the trio vying for the fifth spot to get into that full rotation, and they've got to go out and get a veteran, we trust Alex Anthopoulos.
Oh, yeah.
Challenges, however, in an organization that we're not quite sure what's going on. Don't want to go so far as to say we don't trust them, but we are scratching the heck out of our heads. And we certainly don't know that we would say anything about the organization looks like they have an embarrassment of riches. And that, of course, would be the Atlanta Hawks. We found out that Nate McMillan was relieved of his duties. Now, interestingly enough, that's now the second person at the helm within this organization's 2022-23 season that's been let go. Travis Schlenk, of course, a couple months ago, shifted into the consultant role, never to be heard of from Siberia again. Now, that's
Bali,
it.
wherever you want,
right?
Send him to Bali.
You know what? Actually, you know what? Yeah, with his money being that long, he's probably in Bali. Right. Not Siberia. But if we think about it, well, and we can talk in a few minutes about what it will mean from the basketball perspective on the court now that Joe Prunty's been officially named interim head coach, and we know we have 23 games left. But let's talk about this from an organizational perspective first, Jarvis. When you first heard it, well, how did it make you feel that Nate McMillan, a week after the last game before the season was put on break and just 23 games left in the season, how did you feel that when you found out that the Hawks decided to part ways with him at this point?
The first acronym that came to my mind, a lot of people use it on social media. IDK. I don't know. I have no clue where this organization is going. I don't know who's making decisions on the court when it comes to players and rotations. Now, I don't know who's going to be doing that in the future. I mean, I know Joe Prunty is the interim coach, but it seems like based off of what the names that were thrown out there, they ain't trying to hire him. He's just gonna hold. He's just a placemaker, a placeholder right now. So I think for me, I just don't know where this organization is going, and that is sad. We're 2 years removed from the Eastern Conference Finals appearance. Now, I'm not saying that they're supposed to be contending for a title
Mhm.
in those following years, but we
Right.
need to see progress. We need to
Yes.
see this roster finally start to come together. Some
Mhm.
chemistry starting to finally come together on
Mm.
this roster. And
Yes.
then when you go out and make a move for a guy like DeJounte Murray, the stakes are raised. I don't care how this
Yeah.
roster is made up. If you're giving up 3 first-round picks for a guy like DeJounte Murray, who is an all-star point
Mhm.
guard, if you're
Yes.
pairing him with your all-star point guard and Trae
Mhm.
Young, something got to shake. Something needs to be
Yeah.
done right. And we've seen all wrong this season. And it just,
Yes.
it's like,
Yes.
and I've mentioned this before, like you just don't know what to expect when night in and night out with this team. And it's unfortunate that Nate McMillan has to take the blame for it, essentially. He's getting the blame.
Yeah.
They're pointing
Oh,
the
yeah.
finger and say, hey, Nate, this your fault. Here we go.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah. And you knew that there was every possibility that he would be that fall guy
Of
because,
course.
hey,
Yeah.
it's a league where you can't really fire the player, at least during the course of the season, unless,
Yeah.
he's a Russell Westbrook and you just kind of shift him to Siberia. But other than that, it's
Mhm.
really going to be the coach that kind of takes that L. But I agree with you. I think that shock and confusion and kind of a head scratcher in the IDK realm was what I felt too.
Right.
And I'm not quite sure that less than 24 hours later, I'm completely removed from that, even with the feedback that we've heard and received so far from um, Landry Field's press conference, right? Because we
Right.
have some of our friends to the show there. Of course, our own Brad Rowland, who's a part of the Locked On network. He does, of course, Hawks, Locked On Hawks, and then our girl Lauren Williams, who's a beat reporter for the Hawks. And you and I have been watching
Yeah.
steadily the
Mhm.
tweets coming from there. And I can't tell you, Jarvis, that I see anything that tells me why this was done. Even saying with Landry saying, quote, the decision to move on from McMillan was not solely related to his relationship with Trae Young, but how all of the players were responding to his voice. Oh, yeah, I hear you on that, but kind of sort of everybody was tapped out at this point. I think
Yeah.
Nate and his entire staff and
Like,
Trae and his entire staff.
so,
So are
so let
they
me speak to
all?
that real quick, real quick.
Yes, yes.
So Nate wanted to step down early on in the year. And we talked to our people. We got a couple of people on the inside.
Yeah.
They begged him to stay.
According to everything we
Like,
heard. So how
according to
do
people
we
we
go
talked
from
to.
saying, please, baby,
Come
please,
on.
to you don't have to go home, but you got to get the hell up
When
out of
your
here?
voice
How do
not being
we?
heard no more.
Yeah, how do
Like,
we go
which
there?
one
Like
is
what?
it?
Right, and what happened? And what do we know that Joe Prunty can do? And I do know he's respected amongst the players, but what do we
Right.
believe he could do? It feels like to me the organization. Here's the thing: it could be twofold, and we have to preface at this point by saying most of this is speculation because we're still getting very generic kind of feedback from even the press conference with Landry Fields this morning, and reports are still trying to unravel this and figure out what in the Sam heck happened. But what it feels like to me is there was a thought to keep Nate
Yeah.
as recent as at least a week and a half ago, right?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, 266 points are given up to the last team in the Eastern Conference in the standings and to a team that is your nemesis. But no matter how good they are or bad they are, you still smoke them most of the time. They smoked you this time.
Yep.
And I think that 266 points within 72 hours was just too much to bear. But here's my question too, Jarvis. Okay, fine. Well, why didn't you terminate him last Wednesday?
Mhm.
Like Wednesday night, you
Before the
could have fired
All-Star
him.
break.
Yep, you could have, right.
Yeah.
Clean house and be done with it. So that's kind of a question that's out there on what is the organization's thought process? Like, what is the forward thinking or the rationale for doing it now?
And that's
And
what and
I
that kind of
go
go ahead.
ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah, yeah.
I was just going to say, I think that that's a question that lends itself to a larger issue. Now, granted, and I'm speculating, maybe the NBA said, hey, we don't want that kind of smoke ahead of All-Star. We want the focus on All-Star weekend. You
Okay.
do what you do after the fact. Could
Yeah.
be, could be a non-decision by the Hawks, a decision by the NBA. But again, it just feels very, very odd. It's just questionable how you kind of did it, kind of thief in the night style, where all of us were looking away and it's like, wait a minute. And so that brings to question the organization that people are starting and have been questioning for a while once they found out, where Nick Ressler was in his place, what kind of went down with Travis Schlenk, where Landry Fields kind of falls into place. Does Tony Ressler, really want this team to be a contender when we heard kind of one thing about the luxury tax and then we heard a different thing? And again, these are questions that multiple people, multiple entities are putting out there to say, we're just trying to understand A, where the organization is, and B, where it's headed. Because I told a friend of mine last night who was, of course, our phones have been blown up the last 24 hours with the world trying to make it make sense. And I said to him, the uneasiness is something that we keep thinking is going away. And I took it all the way back to the old leadership team and Danny Ferry and those instances where we thought, okay, it's going away. You get rid of a Josh Smith type, you get rid of a Joe Johnson type, and you just keep doing things. But then you've got this fantastic team with Al Horford and company, and then somehow that gets blown up. You get a decent coach and a really good coach. Obviously, now he's a world champion coach. And Mike Budenholzer, he's out of here. And now we think we get Lloyd. We knew he was a stopgap, but we get Nate. We start putting players around Trey, and still the result is just not there. Whereas, like you and I said, we're not even worried that Kyle Wright is injured. We're not even concerned that Michael Soroka may be taking a step back because we trust Alex Anthopoulos in the front office. It really does, Jarvis, for me, bring up a concern about the long term of what this is going to mean to the organization. Because right now, and you can't just focus on social media. I'll say this and then I'm going to tap out because I need you to tap back in. You can't just pay all the attention to social media, but there's something to be said about even coaches low-key calling Trae Young a coach killer, and whether that reputation is going to precede him as they pursue other free agents to convince them to come here. And number two, when you start going after a Quin Snyder or an Ime Udoka or Steve Nash, those who are at least proven commodities as head coaches, what are their levels of concern going to be in coming here, whether or not this is a next destination for them after they've been out of that space for a minute? Like, is this where they want to start the next chapter of their career? So those are some of the long-term concerns that I have about how this has played out these last 24 hours.
And I think that, to kind of sum it all up, IDK. I don't know where this organization is headed. And that is a big problem. When you have max contract players on right now and Trae Young kicking in next year, then you have DeJounte Murray, who's more than likely going to want a max contract within a year. Yeah. Are you going to be willing to spend that bread? Are you going to make the right decisions in order for him to be able to want to come back? And if he doesn't come back, guess what? That's 3 first-round picks out the door for nothing, for absolutely nothing. And like, don't get me wrong, this is not an indictment against DeJounte Murray because I'm glad he's on this team because we need more guys like him.
Definitely.
But Nick Ressler pushed this through. He pushed this trade through. Travis Schlenk did not want to do that because he thought it was too rich. And to be honest with you, if the end result is DeJounte Murray walking away and signing a big boy deal with another team, Travis Schlenk was doggone right, and Tony Ressler need to fire his damn self. Because it falls in Tony Ressler's lap. He said when he first came in that he's going to let the basketball people make the basketball decisions. But dog it, T, it doesn't look like it. I don't think Landry Fields is making no decisions. Everything that come out of Landry Fields' mouth to me, it sounds like air. It's pure air. He's just a puppet right now. And Tony Ressler is making all the decisions, and he got his doggone son sitting right there to the right of his throne, right there saying, yeah, daddy, let's do this. Do this, daddy. Do this, daddy. And it just is not a good look. And if I'm Quin Snyder, I ain't coming here. If I'm Ime Udoka, I'm being bougie too. I don't care what I did when I was up in Boston and when I got fired for and suspended for a year. Like the Hawks, they got some PR. That PR person going to have to make a lot of money. He better up his doggone salary because he has a lot of work to do as far as how this team is viewed because I'm not optimistic at all with this team right now.
Yeah. And I think that's the overarching feeling. Like no one is, and it's interesting because normally we'd be sitting around if this was even the Falcons, because you know how there was still a shot there was still a shot for forever in the season for them to make the postseason. So you never ever gave up. Once they met, it was like they said what they said. They told you this wasn't a rebuild. They told you they were going to go out there and try to win games, and then they backed it up with what they said, right?
Exactly.
And so we began to focus away from the front office and kind of business decisions to the ball, because they were putting the best product that they could on the football field. Same thing for the Braves. You may not have liked what went down with Freddie Freeman, but I bet you turned away from it after a while when that team started looking like they were World Series contenders again.
Indeed.
So that's what I think Hawks Nation is going to look for. They're going to have a laser focus. Yes, they want to see their team go about 17-6 in these last 23 games so that they can possibly get in the play-in round, because even that right now is in jeopardy. But I think a lot of fans are saying that they have a big concern about what does this mean for the bigger picture of attracting the best free agent talent possible. Of the available coaches, can you get the number one coach that everybody wants, or the number two coach? What does it mean for this franchise as a whole? Because yes, whether you thought it was a fluke or whether you thought it was a peek into the future, the bottom line is people are still looking back at that Eastern Conference Finals run and saying, what the heck has happened? And how in the heck do we get back there? Well, guess what? Anytime you get into this stressful situation, Jarvis and I always have a recommendation for you. A hug from us and your guys at Built Bar. Yes. That's the only thing we can think of. Go for a Built Bar. May make you feel better. I know for me, it typically does, because it can eat away my sorrows. And you can do that too if you are a Hawks fan who is just tongue-tied and your stomach is in knots because you just don't know what the heck is going to go on with your team. So stop blowing up Jarvis's phone. Stop hitting me in the DMs. Go get your Built Bar and help that to make you feel okay, because we're talking about 100% real chocolate. We're talking about some really cool flavors in coconut almond and churro. We're talking about something that, yeah, if you're an online shopper, you can certainly go get that online at built.com. But you can even run up to your local Walmart or your local Sam's Club and get you some Built Bars, because it might take you through at least the first week of the rest of this regular season to kind of make it all make sense for you. So don't forget, good protein, it's soluble, so give you energy back if your energy level was down after what happened last night with McMillan. Also, not a lot of grams of fat. So if you need to, just drown your sorrows, at least you're drowning them with 130 calories. Not a bad deal at all. So again, that's built.com to get your Built Bars, or you can get them at Walmart. And you can get them at Sam's Club, and Jarvis and I will also give you a hug virtually to take along with your Built Bar.
Absolutely. And also, don't be sliding into Tenitra's DMs. Slide into atlday1s@gmail.com. You guys can send us a note there. I forward them right to her. She'll respond. I promise you. After she's done doing her 17 jobs, she got you covered, man. We got you covered here. And if you're listening or watching this doggone program, and you have not subscribed on our YouTube channel or downloaded and podcast on all audio platforms, what are you waiting on? Become a part of the movement. We are on our way to 6,000 subscribers. We're at like 5,500 now. 2,500. That's not a big number. I promise you. We're thinking bigger and much bigger. We're trying to get to 100,000. That's what we are. That's what we think. We think big on this show. So yeah, become a part of the number. 6,000 subscribers. Like, subscribe, download that podcast wherever you get it. I promise you, you won't regret it. Now, T, this is For the Culture. It is the intersection between sports, entertainment, and the culture, and sometimes whatever the hell we want to talk about, because that's just how we get down on the show. Today is no different. How about this, T? The folks out here mad at Snoop, because, Snoop got the Cali red wine, and, it's Black History Month. So apparently there was this gentleman, I ain't going to say his name. He got a little upset because he saw the Cali red wine, Snoop Dogg, wine on display during Black History Month. And he took exception to that and started even invoking Tuskegee Airmen, and like they're selling a food product or whatever.
Right.
And they eventually, Kroger took it down. They took heed, and they, based off of several complaints down in Peachtree City, or Kroger in Peachtree City, I'll say that. But my question is, T, like where does this fall for you? Let me start there. Where does this fall for you as far as, okay, are we taking this a step too far, or they might be onto something?
It kind of feels like we're taking it a step too far. And don't get me wrong, I think that at the end of the day, it can be offensive, because you do think about Cali Red, and you might think, Crips and Bloods and that sort of thing.
Right.
And that does obviously have to me, that's the obvious overtone, right?
Right.
So I could definitely see where it could be offensive, if you will. But I also know typically with Snoop, he's for the most part pretty thoughtful. And for the
Yeah.
most part, he's thinking outside of the box of how we do things. So I'm interested actually to see what his thought process will be, even though, like you said, Kroger decided to just remove it after customers complained. But I'm interested to kind of see what the backside of the conversation is, because
Yeah.
I can see both sides of it, especially when you see Cali Red. Like, I can see
Yeah.
both sides of that. And I
Mhm.
know that we have some issues and some challenges here in Atlanta with gang infiltration from
Mhm.
outside of the state. So I can see it. But then there's a piece of me that says, don't we have some bigger fish to fry? Do we really think
Yeah.
black people are paying
Why are
attention to
we?
Cali Red?
Yeah.
Could be me. Hmm.
Yeah. I'm with you right there. I'm with you right there, T. Like, why are we concerned about a display
Yeah.
in Kroger? Like,
Right.
what is that gonna do for our ancestors? Like,
Right.
we got that doggone Snoop Dogg display taken down. That's what I'm
Right.
talking about. And then Kroger. And here's the thing. Like the thing that really just kind of got me a little amped up a little bit
Uh-huh.
is when there was a statement from the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Department. Excuse me. Kroger is committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion in all we do. Our intentions are never meant to be offensive. Like, that's all that DEI stands for
That's what
is
you
coming out
right.
with statements. Like,
Right. That's what you said? That's what you said.
yeah, like
Which is so,
that's
like, you know what that is, Jarvis? That is, I open my document and, oh, let me choose
copy and
template number
paste. Let me use this
17.
thing.
Exactly. And that'll make this go away. As opposed
Yeah,
to, let's have
yeah,
some conversation. How about
right.
Kroger oversee a speaker series of some sort? Like, get Snoop on a Zoom or get Snoop on an IG or
Something,
something like
man.
that, for and have him to have some conversation with people about, okay, well, tell me why this is offensive to you, because here's what I wanted to do with it. Like, Kroger, instead of just knee jerk reacting,
Yeah,
pulling it from the shelves and
that's the
getting your
problem, right? Yeah.
DEI, exact,
Mhm.
there it is. That's the challenge,
Yeah,
because it's an opportunity for dialogue, as opposed to just running and getting the DEI officer to come out with a 2 sentence statement to make it go away and then to pull the wine. And we really haven't dived into, or dug into rather, what the issue is, because you and I
right.
certainly can attest to the fact that, no, there are layers to this. This will be
Mm,
very, very triggering for some people, and for
yeah,
others it'll be like, no, that's not triggering, but Kroger, while I have your attention, let's talk about XYZ. That's
yeah.
what it should be about.
Exactly. A,
Yeah.
a bigger conversation about
Yes.
not necessarily the display, but
No.
hey, this is what, if you're gonna do this, this is how you should at least have start the conversation. So yeah,
Yes.
that's kind of where I am with it. Yeah. So all right, I feel a little bit better now because I was like, man, we're being real picky when it comes to certain things as to what we're offended by. So yeah,
Mhm.
I'm glad we talked it out. Thank you, T, for making me feel better.
I think we helped Hawks Nations too. We gave them a little
Yes.
psychological support
Yes.
today too. We're here for you.
Absolutely. That's what we're here for. We take you on the couch and we thank you for making ATL Day Ones your first listen of the day. We know we your first. But how about this? Here's what I ask you to do. I don't ask you to do much. I know I say that a lot, but hey, I really mean that. I won't ask you to do much, but we want you to make Locked On Sports Today your second listen of the day with the biggest news and stories. Obviously, they're going to be talking about Nick McMillan as far as where the Hawks are headed going forward. Like we talked about that. And you can find it Locked On Sports Today wherever you find your podcast. And last but not least, folks, if you don't do anything else in life, I want to make sure that you share love, show love, and most importantly, spread love.